All right, so to wrap some things up for the day, I wanted to show you what all was possible with, let me just open this up, with CSS3. CSS has been around for a few years, and it keeps coming out with more and more powerful iterations. So right now we've been pretty, sticking to the safe stuff, background color this, height that. But I'm going to show you some things that you can do very simply using a CSS generator to generate the code so that we don't get completely lost in the technical stuff. Just want to point out that I put paragraph tags around the text in our divs, and I deleted 2 of our divs, so we just have 1 and 2. Same with our styles. Just have the div for the style for div, the style for wrapper, the style for 1, and style for 2. So if we look at our page, let's just go ahead and look at it. There we go. It's pretty plain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the CSS3 generator that I provided a link to it on the website, but it's css3generator.com. And let's see, the first thing I'm going to choose is border radius, because what I want to do is I want to create rounded corners. I'm going to say yes to that question. It asked me if all of my borders were going to be rounded evenly. And I'm going to say, yeah, I want to round my border radius to 65 pixels, which will be good in all these different versions. These are, as you roll over the browser icons, it shows you what version of each of these this code will work in. So this won't work in older browsers, but it will work in the newer ones. So I click on the little clipboard, and I see a check mark showing that I have it in my clipboard as well. And then I just add that code into my CSS. So what I did is I took that code from the generator and I dropped it into my CSS. So I'm going to style the div named 1. So let's see what that did to our div. So there we go. We added border radius, and everything else is the same. It just has rounded corners now. Now, what if you wanted, I'm just going to go ahead and say choose something. I'm going to go to border radius again. This time I'm going to say, it asked me, are your borders going to be rounded equally? I'm going to say no. And in that case, I'm going to put in different values. So I'll put in 20 for the top left, 3 for the top right, bottom right, I'll say 0, and 65 for the bottom left. And let me say 30. All right. And then we can see it generates all this code. And once again, it shows up, which shows what browsers it works in. I copy and paste that into my CSS. So I'm going to actually paste that. Oopsie. Let me get rid of that. Just copy and paste that right there in my CSS. And let's see what that does to my page. So you can see you can actually create all kinds of crazy shapes. If you needed to, you could create a circle. Let me show you how to do that with the generator. You could just put in some crazy high number. And that might do it. Let's just see if that does it. I put in 200 pixels for each side. I'm going to replace that. And we'll examine this code in just a moment. I'm just going to show you what is possible. All right, so with a crazy high, border radius measurement, I created a circle. And you'll notice the text still acts like it's a square, so this takes some tweaking to get right. But what we could do is, well, actually, let's stop right there and look at this code. So you'll notice that it says -webkit-border-radius : 65 pixels. WebKit refers to the web browser. You can tell when it's a web browser, a specific style because or declaration, because it has dash and then a browser name in front of it. So WebKit refers to Safari, and I know it's Safari, and I believe Firefox. Can't remember. No, MOZ refers to Firefox, but this is just making this, since this is a newer attribute that we could change, the generator is just accounting for the WebKit browsers. So that's why this looks like this. Let's also take a look at this code. It says, border radius 200, 200, 200, 200. This is shorthand. I could say border left radius, border right radius, border top, border bottom. I could have separate border radii codes, or I can use shorthand. This has been generated using shorthand, so it just says border radius and then the four different sides. And once again, this is what we get. So that's one thing that we can do. Let's go ahead and choose something. What are we going to choose? Box shadow. So let's say we're going to choose inset no, and it shows you what it's going to do over here on the side. I'm going to say horizontal length 7. That means how many pixels on the y-axis does it go over. I could say -7. See, it moves it over to the left. Vertical length 17, so it goes really far up and down on the x-axis. Then the blur, I can make it super blurry. And spread, I'm just going to give it let's see what happens when I give it so spread makes it move out even more. I haven't used spread very often. I usually just keep it pretty low. And then the hex color, let's see. There we go. It was acting up. I'm going to put in FF0000 for red. It's going to be hideous. You can see all this code is being generated down here. I copy it. And let's say I'm going to put it on 2 because it's a red shadow. I'll put it on the green box. And you can see once again it's all shorthand. It's showing, and it has to be in a specific order to work properly. So this -7 goes in front because that's the horizontal axis, I believe. And then the x-axis, the blur, and the spread. So let's see what that did to our code. I mean there we go. Now this is on top of, you can still position this, you can still add custom fonts, like you can do a lot with CSS. All right, so we just keep adding to our styles. Let's go ahead and see what else we can do. Let's do something to the text shadow. So once again, I'm going to say border radius 24, and that's really blurry. Blur radius, excuse me. I'm going to say 7, so it gets tightened up. And then once again, if I wanted it to be directly behind the type, I could just say 0 horizontal length, 0 vertical length, like that. So it's really spot on. It's not off the x or y axis. But let's just say I want it to be a little bit off. And this one has a color picker, so I'm going to pick a nice bright color so that it really stands out. There we go. So I'm going to once again copy this, and I'm going to add a style for the paragraph, because remember we put the text in a paragraph. I just write my the P and the curly bracket, and there you go. It says text shadow for most of the browsers, and then for I think it's for Explorer, it adds a filter. So it tries to do a little thinking for you. Instead of you having to research this, it tries to do this for you. Now this isn't foolproof. You can see that blur doesn't work terribly well. Let me just add something here. Let's say oh, text size, maybe it's font size, excuse me. Sorry, font size. I'm going to say 35 pixels just to make it bigger. There, you can see it a little bit better now. It gets lost on the screen background, but you can see it here. So let's go ahead and see what else we can do. Now there's some things that I'm not going to show you: multiple columns, box resize, box sizing, outline, transitions. Could say transitions we'll work with later. Transitions are like just what they mean, just what they sound like. They go from one state to another slowly. and let's say linear. Anyway, let's just skip that. Let's go to gradients. Now, it actually directs us to a good gradient generator because it says that I was going to write a gradient generator but came across a great one that was already written. So I click on that, and here's our gradient generator. Gradients are pretty complex. This one takes into account all the different kind of ways it needs to be coded. It takes into account, you know, Explorer, Mozilla, Opera, and so you'll see that the code gets really involved. But I'm just going to pick a simple gradient. There we go. And now you can choose what orientation you want. You can choose what size box you want. But we're going to keep this 300 by 300 because that's the size of our box. And then I simply copy. Where is the copy? Oops. I click the little copy button in the corner. And I'm going to paste it right here on 1. And you can see it generates a lot of code. So let's go ahead and see what that did. All right, it overrides the background color and drops the gradient right in there. So there are a lot of things that you can do using generators online. Now, we'll talk a little bit, we'll take apart the mechanics of the gradients in class. But just remember the CSS3 generator.com and the gradient generator, the ultimate CSS gradient generator, and that's at colorzilla.com/gradient editor. I'll put that link on the class on the Blackboard site.